Michael Jenkins never believed in ghost stories. As a recently divorced freelance photographer, he saw the world through the lenses of logic and reason, capturing reality with each click of his camera. When he found the listing for the Victorian house in the small town of Ravenwood at a price that seemed almost like a donation, he didn't think twice. The real estate agent vaguely mentioned structural issues and need for renovations, but to Michael, this only meant an investment opportunity. What he didn't know was that this house carried secrets much deeper than cracks in the walls or old plumbing, secrets that whispered when everyone slept, secrets that moved in the shadows and watched his every move from the moment he crossed the threshold. The first night in the house was quiet, almost disappointing for such an old building. Michael spent hours photographing the architectural details, planning the renovations he would make. It was only on the second night that the whispers began. Initially, they seemed to come from the ventilation system, explainable, rational, but soon they became more distinct, almost like muffled conversations coming from inside the walls. Michael checked every room, every corner, convincing himself it was just the wind or perhaps some small animal that had found shelter between the walls. But when the whispers began to form words, when they started calling his name in the early hours of dawn, he realized something was deeply wrong. Lights flickered without apparent reason, objects moved when he wasn't looking, and the constant feeling of being watched followed him everywhere. No matter how many times he checked the locks or how long he spent alone in the house, Michael was never truly alone. Not subscribed to the channel yet? Do it now so you don't miss any spine-chilling story. Click the subscribe button and turn on the bell to be notified of new videos. The third night was when Michael finally admitted to himself that something supernatural was happening. He woke up at 3:17 in the morning with the sensation of cold fingers touching his face. When he opened his eyes, he saw only darkness, but the presence in the room was undeniable. A weight in the air, a density that seemed to suck the oxygen from the environment. That's when he noticed the markings on the wall beside his bed. They weren't simple cracks in the old paint, but symbols, words written in a language he didn't recognize, that certainly weren't there when he went to sleep. Trembling, Michael called his only friend in town, David, a local historian who might help him understand what was happening. "Don't touch anything," David said on the phone, his voice heavy with concern. "I think I know which house that is. Local people call it the house that never sleeps, and there's a good reason for that." Michael still clearly remembered the day he saw the listing. Browsing through real estate websites after his painful divorce from Sarah, the Victorian house appeared like a beacon of hope, a new chance, a fresh start. The real estate agent, a middle-aged woman named Karen, seemed nervous while showing the property. "It doesn't usually stay with the same owner for long," she casually commented while opening the creaking door. The interior was impressive, with high ceilings, ornate moldings, and a majestic staircase leading to the second floor. The smell of old wood and something else he couldn't identify filled the air. "Why is it so cheap?" Michael asked, suspicious of the bargain. Karen hesitated, adjusting her glasses. Structural problems, and, well, some people find the house a little unsettling, but those are just local superstitions. Michael smiled. Superstitions didn't pay bills, and he desperately needed a new home. He signed the papers that same afternoon, ignoring the expression of relief on Karen's face when she handed him the keys. Don't forget to like and share this video with your friends who love horror stories. It helps us a lot. The first days were dedicated to cleaning and exploration. The house was larger than it seemed, with various rooms, a dusty attic, and a basement that Michael still didn't have the courage to fully explore. It was on the third day that he noticed something strange, a photograph of himself on the living room table, which he was certain he had left in the bedroom drawer. "I must be tired," he muttered to himself. But then other incidents began. The antique radio he found in the attic turned on by itself, always on the same static station. Doors he left open appeared closed, and vice versa. And then the sounds began. They weren't normal structural noises of an old house settling. They were footsteps, furniture being dragged, and occasionally what sounded like a child crying. Michael began to sleep poorly, frequently waking in the middle of the night with the sensation that someone was standing at the foot of his bed, watching him. When he turned on the light, there was no one there, but the feeling persisted even after darkness returned. returned. It was in the first week that Michael found the diary. He was removing a loose panel in the master bedroom when the leather-bound book fell from inside the wall. The yellowed pages contained the elegant handwriting of a woman named Eleanor Blackwood, dated 1897. "The house is alive," read the first entry that caught his attention. "It breathes when everyone sleeps. It whispers secrets that no one should hear." Michael felt a shiver run down his spine as he read those words, so similar to his own experience. Eleanor described how her husband Thomas had gradually gone mad after they moved into the house, how he began spending entire nights conversing with the walls, how he swore he could hear voices asking to be freed. The last entry was disturbing. "Thomas broke through the basement wall last night, said he needed to free them. What he found there, God help me. What has he unleashed in this house?" The diary ended abruptly, with no explanation of what happened to Eleanor or Thomas Blackwood. The next morning, Michael drove to the Ravenwood Municipal Library, determined to discover more about the Blackwoods and the history of the house. The librarian, an elderly woman named Margaret, turned pale when he mentioned the address. "The Blackwood House," she whispered, looking around as if afraid of being overheard. "Not many people ask about it." With trembling hands, Margaret led him to the local history section and retrieved several yellowed newspaper clippings and a book about the town's founding families. The story that emerged was darker than Michael could have imagined. Thomas Blackwood wasn't just a resident, but the architect who designed and built the house in 1895. According to the records, he was obsessed with occultism and sacred architecture, incorporating strange symbols and specific geometric patterns into the very structure of the house. He believed he could create a portal, Margaret explained, her voice barely audible. A portal between our world and somewhere else. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to leave your comment below and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. The newspapers told a macabre story. In 1897, Thomas Blackwood was found in the basement of the house, surrounded by symbols painted with what was believed to be his own blood. His body was mutilated, but police reports indicated that the wounds appeared self-inflicted. Eleanor had completely disappeared, along with the 5 orphaned children the couple had adopted in the previous months. The search lasted weeks, but no bodies were ever found. The house remained empty for years until a new family moved in 1912. They lasted only 3 months before fleeing in the middle of the night, claiming that the walls talked and that they could hear children crying inside them. The pattern repeated over the decades. Families moved in, attracted by the low price, only to leave in a hurry, often abandoning all their belongings. Some disappeared completely, just like Eleanor. "The last family was the Simmons in 2018, said Margaret, handing Michael a newspaper photo showing a smiling couple with their teenage son. "The boy was the only one found, wandering in the forest 3 days later, completely catatonic. He's in the State Psychiatric Institute to this day, repeating only one phrase, 'They live in the walls.'" Michael returned home with a stack of copies and a weight in his chest. On the way, he stopped at the town's only bar, hoping to calm his nerves with a drink. It was there that he met Frank, an elderly man who had worked as a plumber in town for 50 years. "I've done repairs in that house more times than I can count," said Frank after a few beers, when Michael mentioned where he was living. "Always the same problem, pipes clogged with things that shouldn't be there." When pressed, Frank explained that he frequently found small bone, teeth, and once what appeared to be a mummified human finger. The police investigated but never found anything conclusive. They said they were remains of animals that got into the plumbing system. Frank leaned closer, his alcohol breath strong. "But I know what I saw, and you know what else? The walls of that house, they don't make sense. There are spaces between them that shouldn't exist, spaces that don't appear in the original blueprints. It's as if the house is bigger on the inside than on the outside." When Michael asked why nobody had investigated more thoroughly, Frank laughed bitterly. "Who would want to mess with the Blackwood House? In this town, we've learned to leave some secrets buried." Armed with knowledge about the house's history, Michael returned determined to face whatever was inhabiting its walls. He installed cameras in every room, audio recorders, and even motion detectors. If something supernatural was happening, he would capture the evidence. The first nights of surveillance were frustrating. The cameras frequently failed at crucial moments. The audio files contained only static or, more disturbingly, what seemed to be whispers in an unknown language, too distant to be understood. It was on the fourth night that Michael made his first significant discovery. Reviewing the recordings, he noticed a shadow that moved independently of any light source, sliding across the wall as if it were liquid. Later that same night, while sleeping, he was awakened by a noise coming from the basement. He descended the stairs, armed only with a flashlight and his camera. The basement was colder than the rest of the house, the air dense and damp. As he illuminated the farthest corner, Michael saw something that made his blood freeze. The wall seemed to be breathing, enjoying this spine-chilling story. Click the like button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next horror video. With his heart racing, Michael approached the pulsating wall. As he got closer, he could hear the whispers more clearly. "Help us," they seemed to say. "Free us." Taken by an impulse he couldn't explain, Michael began to tear off the wallpaper. Underneath, he found symbols identical to those Thomas Blackwood had drawn, carved directly into the wood. They seemed to pulse with their own light, weak but undeniably present. When he touched one of the symbols, a sharp pain shot through his hand like an electric shock. At the same time, all the lights in the house went out. In the total darkness, Michael heard something moving inside the wall, not just whispers now, but the unmistakable sound of nails scratching wood, of many small hands trying to get out. Panic took hold of him when he realized the sounds were coming from all directions. The entire walls of the house seemed alive, pulsing in a rhythm that resembled a beating heart. Michael ran up the stairs, stumbling in the dark, only to discover that the front door wouldn't open. He was trapped. Desperate, Michael called David, the local historian who had mentioned knowing the history of the house. "You need to get out of there now," David said when Michael explained what was happening. Thomas Blackwood wasn't just building a house, he was building a vessel. Those symbols, they're part of an ancient ritual to capture souls. David explained that, according to his research, Blackwood believed he could achieve immortality by absorbing the life energy of others. The adopted children, Eleanor, all the people who disappeared in the house over the years, they hadn't simply vanished. He put them in the walls, Michael. Somehow, he found a way to trap their souls in the very structure of the house. As David spoke, Michael noticed something disturbing. Small protrusions began to form on the walls around him, as if hands and faces were pressing from the inside out, trying to break through the surface. "There's a master symbol," David continued. "Blackwood must have hidden it somewhere in the house. If you can find it and destroy it, you might be able to free the trapped souls." The call suddenly dropped, leaving Michael alone with the horror unfolding around him. The walls now groaned and contorted, as if in agony, and in the midst of that chaos, Michael realized he had only one choice: to find the master symbol before he became another soul trapped in the house that never sleeps. The search for the master symbol led Michael back to the basement where everything had begun. With the flashlight trembling in his hands, he examined every inch of the contorted walls. The whispers were now so loud they seemed like screams, a cacophony of voices begging for release. It was then that Michael noticed something strange on the concrete floor, a perfect circle that seemed slightly newer than the rest. Using an old shovel found in the corner, he began to break through the concrete. Each blow seemed to make the entire house shudder in pain. When he finally broke through the surface, he found a sealed metal box. Inside it, a book bound in human skin, Thomas Blackwood's grimoire. The pages described in horrifying detail how he had discovered an ancient ritual that allowed transferring human souls into inanimate objects. "The house is not just a structure," Michael read, Blackwood's voice echoing in his mind. "It is a living organism, fed by the suffering and despair of its victims. Each new soul strengthens its walls, expands its consciousness. One day, it will grow beyond its physical limits, extending into the outside world." Don't forget to share this video with your friends who love horror stories. Leave your comment about what you found most frightening so far. At the center of the grimoire was the master symbol, an intricate geometric design that seemed to change and twist as Michael observed it. According to Blackwood's notes, the symbol was the anchor that kept all souls bound to the house. Destroying it would free the spirits, but also release energy accumulated for more than a century. Michael Michael knew what he needed to do. With trembling hands, he tore out the page with the symbol and searched for matches. At that moment, he felt a presence behind him. Turning slowly, he saw a tall, thin figure emerging from the darkness. A man in Victorian clothes with completely black eyes and a smile that impossibly stretched across his face. "Thomas Blackwood," whispered Michael, backing away. The figure tilted its head, the smile never faltering. "You think you can free them?" The voice sounded like several people speaking in unison. "They are mine now, part of the house, part of me, just as you will be." The walls around began to move more violently, partially formed hands and faces emerging from the wood, stretching toward Michael. With a quick movement, Michael lit a match and set fire to the page with the master symbol. An inhuman scream echoed throughout the entire house, coming not just from Blackwood, but from the walls themselves. The spectre lunged forward, but its body began to disintegrate, as if being pulled back into the now collapsing walls. Michael ran up the stairs while the house literally fell apart around him. Furniture flew through the air, windows exploded, and the sound of hundreds of voices screaming in agony and relief filled the air. He managed to reach the front door, which now opened freely. From the front lawn, Michael watched in horror as the Blackwood House imploded upon itself, as if being sucked into an invisible point at its center. When the dust settled, nothing remained but an empty crater where the imposing Victorian mansion once stood. In the air, Michael could feel a lightness, as if a great weight had been removed from the very fabric of reality. In the days that followed, he discovered that the records of the Blackwood House had mysteriously disappeared from the town archives. Margaret herself, the librarian, denied any knowledge of Thomas or Eleanor Blackwood. It was as if the house had never existed. Only Michael and his journal of notes remained as witnesses to the horror that had inhabited that plot of land. Sometimes, late at night, he still wakes up with the sensation of cold fingers touching his face and the distant sound of whispers in the walls. And in his dreams, he sees an empty lot where a new house is being built and a smiling young couple signing papers, attracted by a price that seems too good to be true. Stories like that of Michael Jenkins and the Blackwood House remind us that there are mysteries in the world that defy our rational understanding. Places where the veil between worlds becomes thin, where the past never truly dies, but merely waits patiently in the shadows. Some would say Michael was a victim of his own imagination, that the house was just an old structure with structural problems and a reputation exaggerated by local superstition. Others would believe his story, recognizing that there are forces beyond our comprehension that occasionally manifest in our world. The plot where the Blackwood House stood remains empty to this day, with rumors that no construction company will accept the project, no matter how lucrative it may seem. Local residents avoid passing by after nightfall, and children tell stories about voices that can be heard whispering from the ground on particularly quiet nights. As for Michael, he was never the same again. He abandoned photography, unable to trust the images he captured, always looking for shadows or hidden faces in the background. He moved to a small coastal town where the constant sound of waves drowns out any whispers that might follow his footstep. He keeps a detailed journal of his experience, not to convince others, but as a reminder to himself that he survived, that he faced something beyond human comprehension and emerged from the other side. Perhaps not whole, perhaps forever changed, but alive. And on nights when the wind blows strongly against the windows of his small seaside apartment, when shadows seem to move with a life of their own, Michael turns on all the lights and repeats to himself, "Walls are just walls. Shadows are just shadows." But a part of him will always know the truth, that sometimes, when the world is quiet and the darkness is deep, houses whisper secrets we should never hear. If this story touched something in you, if it made you look twice at the shadows in your own home, know that you are not alone. For true terror does not reside in fantastic monsters or supernatural creatures, but in the possibility that the world we know is merely the surface of something far more vast and incomprehensible. And perhaps, just perhaps, the walls around you have stories of their own to tell, if you're willing to listen to the whispers.